It's a neat mic.
Hello and welcome to the Man of Legacy podcast. This is episode number 6. I'm your host, Coach Dennis. We're here to talk about men, women, families, sex, masculinity, and life in general. Today's guest is Dr. Charlie Cartwright, founder of People Success Labs. He's a leader in employee engagement, has spent over 20 years working in and around Fortune 500 companies, and also Dr. Charlie is an amazing keynote speaker. And I can personally attest to that. I've listened to him a few times at conferences. He fills the room and he has a powerful message. If you're listening to this and you're looking for someone for a keynote speaker for a conference or to kick off an initiative with your team, you need to look him up. He really can hit a home run for you. Welcome, Charlie.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Hey, I love one of your quotes. Engagement is the measure of how much people care. I love that because in the safety world, which we're both in, I've been operating on the principle that I call the 3 C's: care, compassion, and concern. I believe that you truly have to have people know how much you care before you can have an impact.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I know you specialize in employee engagement. What are some of the numbers related to that? What are some of the things people would be kind of stunned to hear?
Yeah, it's an amazing thing, employee engagement. Right now, only about a third of the workforce of the United States are engaged now. The scary thing is that's the highest number in the world. So
Wow.
You go outside the U.S., it's much, much lower. It's in the teens in many countries. So basically 33% of the workforce is engaged, and by that I mean they really care about their job, they care about their coworkers, they care about the organization they represent, and they're passionate, drive the organization forward. Looking at about 33%. Then people that are disengaged, basically they're just going through the motions, you're talking about another 51%. So over half the workforce shows up, does the minimum, looks for their paycheck. And then the remainder are actively disengaged. So these are your angry employees that are actually deliberately doing things to undermine the organization.
Would you say those are easy to spot?
Very easy, if you're looking.
If you're looking.
If you're looking.
If you don't have blinders on.
Exactly.
You know, that's kind of stunning that we have the highest engagement level, because when you look at other countries, you go over to Europe, they have 4 to 6 weeks vacation. They go on holiday for weeks at a time. They don't have the crazy hours we have. Do we have our priorities wrong? Or is it something related to the way the companies look at people?
I really believe it's the way companies look at people. People are wired to respond to great treatment, good treatment, and we're wired to respond negatively when we feel like we're threatened in any way or being mistreated. It's really that simple. And so when people feel they're mistreated in any way, they're not going to respond favorably to their work.
Okay, and I've seen that in the work comp arena. When you treat people right, less of them get lawyers. They do a better job on restricted duty. They understand you've got their back, and they do the right thing.
100%. That's 100% correct.
And it's funny you say about how you treat people. Found out after you agreed to come on the podcast, so we have a mutual friend, and you know, it comes down to people love working for her because of the way she treats people.
She's awesome.
Yeah.
Just an awesome human being. And you're right. You just feel in her presence, I think she makes you feel valued and cared about.
Yeah.
I mean,
absolutely.
It's big.
And yes, we're talking about you, Michelle. What are some of the symptoms you see of disengagement? The warning signs.
The warning signs, people will, first of all, they're doing the minimum. They're not participating. They're not active participants in activities inside or outside of work. They're probably going to go dormant, be very, very quiet, not really forthcoming with any ideas on how the work can be improved. And I think that another key symptom would also just be their interactions with their coworkers.
And as we're recording this, my lawn service just showed up. So if we have a little background noise, folks, I apologize.
Yeah.
There's no way to really control that at this point. So the last time I heard you speak was at SafeCon Expo, and as you were talking on engagement, I heard the message differently, because as I'm going to this journey and making this transition to a full-time men's coach, I had the aha that this is what I'm seeing in the relationships. Now, do you see that there's any crossover with this issue and people's home life?
Absolutely. I think that when relationships start to sour, one or both parties stop caring as much about the other person's feelings, stop caring as much about the other person's opinions, stop caring as much about the other person's goals, or completely not understanding those things.
Yeah, and one of the things I've seen is that with men, as I've been doing this work and looking at the men, first they become disengaged with their friends, their male friends. It starts gradually over time. When they've met their future wife, they're doing stuff with the boys, they're dating her, and then as you get married, they start doing less and less with their friends. They get a little bit disengaged, and then they fall into the trap of just that work and home, and they kind of become disengaged from their true self. And it's all about running to the soccer games and the sporting events. And I think this leads to a lack of engagement from both the husband and the wife in the marriage. One of my core beliefs, the mistake men make, is they stop dating their wife. And, would you see these as red flags or symptoms of the disengagement?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that goes both ways too, that when they're dating, like you said, the husband wants to look his best, and he's on his best behavior, and he's well groomed, and he's make sure that the car is good and it's clean and all these things. And for some odd reason, once the marriage is consummated and you get into the routine, then all of a sudden, he's not paying as close attention to his grooming, the way he's speaking to his spouse, the way that he presents himself. And really, when he's dating her, he wants to create an experience for her, right? He wants her to really feel loved and cared about and feel like a queen. And then there's a loss of creating that experience, I think, over time. Familiarity, maybe get lazy a little bit, and then the dating stops also a lot of times.
Yeah.
When they're dating, they're going out once a week, maybe 5-6 times a month. Now all of a sudden you talk to married couples and they haven't been out in months or even years on a date.
Yeah, and that's what I see as the core breakdown. And what I teach men, it's your responsibility to lead in the romance department. Dr. Glover and some of the other coaches and men in this field talk about that. And I tell them, that means getting the babysitter. And having a backup babysitter, because you can't always count on just one, and making plans. And I've had a couple of guys who've never planned the dates. When I get them to do this, they're very uncomfortable. They just don't get it, and come back and say, the woman said it was so nice, the man to do the planning. And it was quite interesting because of they just don't get it. They don't remember back when they were trying to pursue them. They just, fallen into the routine and the kids. And I think the other big mistake is they make the kids the priority in the marriage instead of making the marriage the priority. And I think it just undermines the whole family unit long term.
Yeah, it's such a complex issue and challenge. And I spoke to a high school class just yesterday and talking to them about decision making, and one of the things that came up was literacy, not just foundational literacy, talking about reading, writing, and arithmetic, but financial literacy. There's literacy in health. There's also a literacy in relationships. And so when I came out, I had my doctorate degree. Wow, I'm one of the most educated people in the world. Yes, in this field. But you pull me out of there, pull me into, hey, relationship with your spouse, and all of a sudden, all that education, all that knowledge, all that accomplishment goes away. Because what example did I grow up with? And never really put that time in, because how I became a doctor is putting time into the study and the research of my craft. Well, now when it comes to relationships as men, we don't think, and it's not, I don't think that's a character flaw as much as it is a blind spot, that we don't think that, hey, maybe we should read some books on this stuff. Maybe we should have a conversation. Maybe we should ask her what she would like. Hey, this gentleman over here has a successful marriage. I wonder what he does. I wonder what that couple does. We haven't become students of the game. Then all of a sudden the relationship goes bad and we're wondering why.
Yeah.
When the reality is that we didn't put the same effort, to your point, we did when we were dating, and then we didn't put the same effort into that relationship that we did with our career, right? Or
guys
education.
are focused on their careers.
Right.
We will just go.
And that's what we've been through our society, or maybe a father figure example. That's what we've known and what we believe would be successful. And so I've learned these are called self-limiting false beliefs, right? It's a belief that we have, we believe is true. It's not true. We don't know it's not true. Therefore, it's self-limiting. And then we really fall into this trap, this quicksand, and all of a sudden, boom, you've got a failed marriage and you're wondering what happened.
And if you don't learn and you don't go down the path of growth, what happens with the second one? We all know.
Same thing, right?
Same thing.
Same
Every
thing.
relationship will end the same way at a different time frame,
Exactly.
depending on the players.
What's that saying? Wherever you go, there you are.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and I think you nailed it, though. We don't know what we don't know.
We don't.
Did anyone teach you how to be a good husband?
Absolutely not. I actually got taught the opposite. My father was a terrible husband. Terrible. Of course, I didn't know it because I had no perspective. You're a kid growing up in that house. That's all you knew. My dad was kind of a psychopath. I didn't know. No one said, hey, your old man's crazy, don't you? I didn't know.
That was your normal.
That was my norm. And then when I got out, I was like, wow, you mean other fathers don't beat their kids? You mean other fathers don't threaten to kill the whole family? Oh, wow, that wasn't good. Right? And so it's funny to think about, but at the time, that was my world. That's all I knew. So now I come out of here broken and damaged, not knowing I'm broken and damaged. And then when you're broken and damaged, then other people are going to experience you in that way, and you don't even know it, which is the scary part.
And the reality is your wife has her own damage and is broken in her own way because of the same thing. She doesn't know what she doesn't know.
Exactly.
And this is what happened in my first marriage. I thought, work hard, provide, and love your family, and that's all you need to do. No.
Absolutely not. It's so interesting. My grandfather, he was a great man. World War II vet, worked at the post office 31 years. He was a union steward there. Well-respected, hardworking guy. I mean, he loved me unconditionally. He taught me so many things. But within that, he really wasn't really too interested in what my grandmother thought or had to say. Wasn't. And I love my grandmother. Okay, she was a great woman. Taught me probably more than he did. But I mean, his dinner was served to him. He never did a dish. When he was done eating, she came and got it. And you know what? She better never disagree with him or he'd get in her face. That was the culture at that time. It was the culture.
It is just different when you go back
Right.
generationally.
And so I look at that and go, man, that's what I viewed, and that wasn't good.
And that's what your dad viewed growing up.
Exactly. You can't do that stuff anymore. And it was never good. But over time, through the history of this country, somehow that got accepted. That was acceptable norm. Or now as we evolve as a society and as people, we understand that that is unacceptable. You can't treat other human beings that way. But there's just a lot of people that had a bad script growing up and didn't know that it was a bad script. And then you get out in the real world with real relationships and all of a sudden they fail. And you're like, wow, because I was thinking, man, I'm doing great. I don't have an alcohol problem like my dad did. I don't use drugs.
I'm not addicted to porn.
Right. I'm not, some nights he didn't come home, where he was at. I don't do that. I'm working hard.
And I love her. So I'm doing everything
great.
right.
What I didn't understand is that's the minimum.
Yeah.
Right. I thought I was really excelling.
Yeah.
That's the minimum, man.
So that makes you ordinary, and really to have a great connected, loving relationship that we really want. You need to be extraordinary. The minimum doesn't cut it.
Exactly. And you're looking at this woman that you've married. You feel like she's an extraordinary woman. That's why you married her. Well, she deserves your extraordinary effort on the relationship side. So I'm making this extraordinary effort on the schooling side. I'm making this extraordinary effort on the work side and not making it. I'm wore out. I'm burnt out. I just want to go home. I just want to sit down and relax, turn the television on, whatever. And it's unacceptable.
Yeah, and it's just, we don't know what we don't know. And until we have somebody hit us on the head and say, I love you, but I'm not in love with you, or I want a divorce, a lot of the guys, don't ever wake up and look at it differently.
Yeah, that's a devastating thing, right? It's so devastating to you. And you're like, wow, it's such rejection.
What do and I know what I did, and a lot of guys do. What do I need to do to fix it? We want to fix things.
Yeah, let's fix it. We can just have a
Tell me what I need to do.
I'll do this stuff, right? Give me the list.
Yeah.
Hey, I'll check it off. I'll get all the stuff.
And then everything will be okay, right?
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, and then it doesn't work like that.
No,
yeah.
not at all.
It is the guys who have a little more sense realize they've got to do some work, and then the others want to just blame their partner.
Exactly.
Now, there is a small percentage. There's an issue with the partner on both sides, But the reality is, most of the men I deal with, they're married to a good woman. They've just become disengaged. Both of them, haven't learned how to be a good husband and wife, and they've put the wrong things first. And then it's one of those things. I tell the guys, I said, well, there's 3 outcomes to doing the work. I said, one is you have a better version 2.0 of your marriage because version 1 doesn't work. Version 1 doesn't work. That's why you're having the divorce discussion. Then option 2 is she's going to still want a divorce. There's nothing you can do that. If one party wants a divorce, you're done. I said, then there's option 3. And a lot of it, maybe half of them know what it is. And I go, do you know? And they're like, no. I said, you may divorce her. You do the work and become a better man, a great man. You may go, well, she's got all the, and she may not do the work. And the biggest problem I see is they're impatient. They've been disengaged for 5 years, 7 years, and they want to fix things in 3 months or 6 months, and they don't understand why it isn't instantly happening. And it kind of goes to our microwave society as opposed to the crock pot. You're trying to rebuild that connection and make it a better one, and it just isn't something that happens overnight.
100% true. 100% true.
So we were talking a little bit about Johan Hari's TED Talk on addiction, and I was really shocked about the results in Portugal. They decriminalized drugs, and they worked on focusing on, once the addicts got clean, reconnecting them with society, and the stats were 50% decrease in IV drug use after 15 years. We haven't seen a decrease anywhere where we have it as a criminal issue, and then overdoses and addiction across the board is down. And it kind of goes to the whole being engaged thing again.
Yeah, it's amazing just the power of engagement, of community, of being connected with other human beings, and the impact that can have on these things. Because when people get into these different addictions, it's something lacking in their life.
They're filling a void.
They're filling a void, their life, that meaning that's so huge. Viktor Frankl talked about it, Man's Search for Meaning, how powerful meaning is. And when we lose that, then people are grasping, and it's human nature to grasp, to try to somehow gain that. Yeah,
and I maybe have a fairly harsh view of addicts, so to see that it actually, how helpful it was. And the thing I left out is in Portugal, they took the money they spent on locking them up and enforcing the law into programs to get them reconnected. And, you don't know, nothing's going to be 100% successful, but anything that reduces addiction 50%, something you need to look at. Look at the root cause. And nobody's talking about going back to making it illegal. I thought that was quite fascinating.
It is. I remember going to a talk. The gentleman's name was Frank, can't remember his last name, but his talk was "Can I Be Frank?" And he wrote a book and how he had struggled with addiction, alcohol, and drugs, and come out of that and really was giving talks all over the country, written a book, did a mini documentary. And he said a lot of times many people believe that the opposite of addiction is sobriety. He said it's not. He said the opposite of addiction is connection.
Well,
it's huge.
And it kind of goes, I'm a big fan of Brene Brown, and she focuses on empathy and vulnerability. And as I was preparing for our sit down, I was thinking about how vulnerability is such a key requirement for engagement in a relationship and connection. What do you see the keys as engagement in personal relationships?
Vulnerability is huge, because I think you have to be yourself. You have to be your authentic self, and that's hard. And the reason why it's hard is because we so much want people to like us, people to love us, and the reality is not everybody's going to like you. Not everybody's going to be your friend. Not everybody can be your wife. Not everybody can be your best friend. So it's really hard to say, hey, I'm going to be myself, who I really am. And then some people aren't going to like that. But you have to be comfortable with that, because it's going to draw the right people to you. The people that you should be in relationships with, the people that you should be friends with, are going to be attracted to the authentic you in every situation. The other thing about the vulnerability side of relationships is you have to be vulnerable enough to admit your imperfections and the need to overcome those, improve whatever you need to do to become a better version of yourself. And that's really a challenge. And when someone points out to us in any relationship that we're imperfect, it's challenging to not get offended
or defensive,
but to take positive action in that space. And then there's things that you can't change, for instance, and to be okay with that hey, that relationship's not going to work out, because I'm never going to be a guy that goes skydiving. That's just not me. Okay, I'm not jumping out of a perfectly good airplane. I'm not going to do it, right? And if that's a deal breaker, it's a deal breaker. And so that's my thoughts there.
Yeah, there are the core self that you're not going to change, but and as we try to get men to understand, you can improve, grow, and become a better version of yourself. And that may mean you made a selection mistake when it came to a spouse, as you are honest with yourself. And it's one of those things that too many of the men think they see divorce as it means they're a failure. And it really doesn't mean that. It didn't work out. It's a failure if you learn nothing from it and you repeat the same sequence and behaviors and continue to have failed relationships. If you grow from it, and if you've got some wonderful kids from it, it's never a failure.
Exactly. And I think it's just so important to understand that your happiness is important, but so is her happiness. And if she's truly not happy, every human being deserves happiness. And if that's in another venue, in another relationship with another person, then so be it. Yeah. We have to be, that's about caring. And, I talked about love in my presentation, too, that you heard. And one of the aspects of love is it's an unselfish desire for the well-being of another human being. So letting your spouse go, be free to go into a relationship that's better for them, that's an unselfish love for their well-being. And we should all be for that and be positive for that. Another thing I'll add in our relationships, and I can't speak for other countries, I can only speak in the United States. We have a hard time letting go of any relationship, whether it's a friendship, a business relationship, or a marriage, without anger. We can't separate without anger. We got to be angry at that person. We got to be mad at that company. And it's so counterproductive. It doesn't help anything. It doesn't help anyone.
And I can look back and think, wow, yeah, that I was angry with that, And then there's a point in my life where I remember one job, the position was eliminated, and I went home with the biggest smile on my face. I wasn't happy because they weren't truly committed to safety. And everyone was like, aren't you upset? I'm like, hell no. I'm like, the 500-pound monkey is off my back. Was I a little concerned? Yes, but it really was, it's a point where I started growing. And it was post-divorce, and I was past the point of being angry. And I had started growing a little bit. Not nearly as much as I have in the last few years, but, I didn't even think about it from the angry standpoint. You're right, we don't like to let go. There's comfort in the known, and we fear the unknown because we tend to go negative. It's a human trait instead of looking at the positive.
Exactly. And then we're shifting blame. Well, they didn't do this, and they're this way, and them. So it shifts all that responsibility away from us, which is really the opposite of what we need to do. We need to take full responsibility for our share, whether that's 10%, 90%, or 100%. We need to take responsibility for that, learn from it, and move on. And
I forget who said this. I saw it in either a video or a podcast. He asked the question, about in a relationship, how much are you responsible for? And, the newly married guy's like 50%, and people are, and he's like, no, it's 100%, because you have to be 100% all in to make, to be able to, basically it really comes to tolerate when the other person stumbles. Then you're there to pick them up instead of going, well, you're supposed to be doing this much or this. And it goes to being the minimum requirements as opposed to doing the extraordinary amount.
Yep.
And if you do that, you end up with an extraordinary life.
You really do. And when you do that, you're not keeping score. Okay, that was the 13th time, and so therefore you've crossed the limit.
We do like to keep score of things we shouldn't.
Exactly.
With the men I coach, obviously one of the first things that goes away before everything blows up is sex.
Yep.
And they can tell you how long it's been. They can sometimes tell you how many times it's occurred in the last year. We keep score about that.
Yes.
But the guys who've been most successful, when I ask the question, do you care if it was only 3 or 4 times a month that you had sex with your wife, or even as little as 2, but it was connected, loving, passionate, amazing sex, would you be okay with that? Every one of them has been yes. It isn't about, even though we focus on frequency and numbers, it isn't about that. It is about the connection. Yeah. I always find that fascinating. The one other thing I think about that I see that is our biggest challenge, I think, is smartphones. I almost think people are becoming more engaged and connected to their phones than they are to other human beings.
Very true.
I am about to end, but I've done balloons at a restaurant at Red Robin for 11 years. And I have gone to, when I used to go table to table, there's been a couple of families, family of 4, 2 adults, 2 kids. I watched them during the entire meal, all on their smartphones, none of them talking to each other. And honestly, I was kind of disgusted, and it's becoming more and more, I see it with the parents. They think they have to keep track on everything on social media instead of actually engaging and being present in the moment with whatever they're doing with their spouse, their family, their kids. And same thing happens at work.
Yeah, it's a big issue, and this relationship that human beings are having with smart devices is very new. And so we don't know what we don't know, but it's becoming painfully obvious. And now research is showing that there's definite correlation between how much time people spend staring at that phone to how happy they are. And the more you spend time on that phone, the less actual happiness there is, the less connections. And I think this is something that is unfortunately going to snowball because you're growing up, a generation's growing up that doesn't really understand how to connect with other human beings outside of a smart device. And so how will business be done? How will relationships grow? How will our society progress as far as some of the things that are going on really show a lack of care and concern for fellow man? And the farther we move away from one another, the more disconnection, the more prevalent those aberrant behaviors are going to be, right? The violence, the just people being really plain mean and nasty. It's really hard to do that when you're standing in front of someone.
Yeah.
Right.
Will you say what you'll put online to somebody's face?
Exactly. Because I just know personally, people don't speak to me that way in face-to-face ever. But I can tell you that they'll get on that keyboard and say some nasty things without a problem.
Distance and anonymity.
Exactly.
Sometimes not even anonymity. It's just the distance.
Exactly. So it's a challenge, and I think that's something that the successful couples in the future will have to be aware of that and manage those things for sure. Because it definitely is. It's nice to have it. It's such a convenience and so powerful, and from a business standpoint, it's essential. But you have to have an on and off times. Mm-hmm. You have to manage that, and you have to get into healthy habits with your phone.
Yeah, I know when at my last employer, before I went self-employed, work comp, I had California offices. They're across the country, so when something happened, I would get called. But when I had dinner with my family, my phone was off. I turned the ringers off, and I actually wouldn't pick it up. If it did vibrate, I'm going to have dinner with my family, then I can check my phone. And I think just that little habit. Simon Sinek was talking about how you should ban cell phones at meetings, that you don't bring them in, because where we used to come into the meeting and talk and build connections, now we're there on our phones the whole time, waiting in our own little world and waiting for the meeting to start, as opposed to engaging and connecting with the other fellow human beings that you're working with. I know personally, like most people, I got to the point where, the phone dings and, oh, what's that? And I went and I have worked actively. I've turned off most of my notifications because most of them don't matter. And I have some work emails that will ding a certain way and a couple of other things that will ding. But there's no such thing as an urgent text. If you don't answer the text and it's truly urgent, we all know that any normal human being is going to call you, because it is a phone. I think a lot of people forget that. You can actually talk. But that's one of the things for anyone listening. Turn off the notifications that don't matter. If you can't sit there and hear your phone ding and not automatically think you have to check it, you've got a problem. I know that I've had people look at me because my phone will be dinging and I don't even react anymore. And that took some work, because they're programmed, this whole thing, and the dopamine hit and the addiction to we're looking for the people are looking for the likes, but those 1,000 followers or friends you have on Facebook aren't the ones that are going to come sit by you in the hospital. They're not the ones who are going to be there when you truly have crap going on in your life.
It's very true. It's such a it's such an illusion. Mm-hmm. That you have 3,000 friends. You don't have 3,000 friends.
No.
You don't. You can fit if you can fit all of your friends in a minivan, you've got a really good crew. I'm talking about people that you could call. I always give this example. If I was in Vegas and I got caught up in Vegas and I ended up in jail, this hasn't happened, it's just an example. But I have all my true friends. I could call them and say, hey, I need you to come to Vegas and bail me out of jail. They would get on the first thing smoking out of whatever city they're in. They would come down. They would bail me out. We'd get in the cab or the Uber on the way back to the airport. Then they'd look at me and go, what are you doing, dude? What in the world? After they'd dropped everything to come and help me. Those are the people. And that's just the reality in life, is all the people that are like that in your life, you're going to be able to fit them in a minivan.
Yep, you're right. They did studies in the 50s and asked people how many friends do you have that you truly can tell anything to? And, and the number was 2 then.
Right.
And since then, the square footage in our house has doubled. And when they've done the same questionnaires on people nowadays, the answer is 0. I call it move a body friends. I have a core group of friends that will help me move a body. And I had one good friend. He's like, I've got a bunch of kids. I'm like, we're not going to get caught if I call it you. You just need to. I'll have booties. We'll have. And he's like, and I'm like, trust me, I'm not planning on it. But
Right.
you're right. If you could fill a minivan with people like that, you have an amazing life.
Amazing life. And I remember I had a friend call me, was it last year? Flew into Des Moines. Hey, I need you to come to Des Moines, pick me up at the airport, and drive me back to Kansas City. I'm like, what time do you need me to be there? Okay, be there. So, no questions. I drive to Des Moines, pick him up, on our way back to Kansas City. We had been in the car 5 minutes. He said, Charlie, you're one of 2 people in the world that I know I could call to ask this favor and would not ask me why. I still don't know why. But
Doesn't matter, does
doesn't
it?
matter. It doesn't mean he needed me and I was there.
Yeah. And true connection, true engagement, true friendship as opposed to, like you said, the artificial or imagined world online, which is what really matters in life.
Yeah.
And so for those listening, can you fill a minivan? And if the answer is no, can you fill the front seat and have anyone else there with you? And if the answer is no, maybe you need to be a little more vulnerable, do a little work on yourself, and connect and focus on connecting with people more. Doesn't mean vulnerability is fun. Lord knows sometimes it gets really uncomfortable to share things with others, but that's where the connections are made. One of the things we teach the guys is they've got to re-engage with yourself first. They need to step back a little bit from the issues they're having, and they've got to learn to love life and themselves again before they can start working at or hoping to reattract their spouse or really become involved in a good, loving relationship again.
Right.
All right, that's it for this episode. I want to thank Dr. Charlie Cartwright for coming on. Guys, there's a lot of wisdom that you heard today from him. I want you to take a few moments and think about, are there any changes you need to make to improve yourself? You're already whole. You're already fine as you are. You just need to make a few tweaks. And you guys, just remember, you got this. You're going to be okay.